Hello, I'm TOUJGANI Ihssane, PhD student from Abdelmalek Saidi University in Tétouan in Morocco. First of all, I would like to thank the team I work with for their invaluable support. So, my contribution title is Diversity of Local Genetic Resources of Castanea sativa mill in northern Morocco, Interactions between Agromorphological Diversity and Peasant Practices. Morocco's unique geographic location gives it a remarkable variety of bioclimates ranging from humid to desert. This corresponds to a great bioecological and, therefore, specific and genetic diversity. It is also the third country in the Mediterranean basin in terms of number of vascular species, with a high rate of endemism according to the Moroccan Ministry of Water and of the Environment. In Morocco, unlike what is done on an international scale, the arrival of intensive cultures has meant that several selected and high-yielding species have been able to gradually replace our species well adapted to the condition but with a much lower yield. This trend has caused, on one hand, the loss of an ancestral traditional know-how, and in the other one, a loss of agrobiodiversity and genetic erosion. In this situation, many species have been forgotten and neglected by science and economics. Castanea sativa mill, subject of our study, is one of the species victim of neglect, yet it's one of the oldest species in the Mediterranean. It constitutes an agroforestry system with a great socio-economic and ecological potential, the rational exploitation of which will provide additional income to one of the poorest populations in the country. From a genetic resources point of view, the Moroccan ecotypes have escaped canker and ink, the causes of the collapsed chestnut famine. Our study aims, via a multidisciplinary approach, to identify and locate Moroccan chestnut growth, evaluate the diversity of Moroccan chestnut ecotypes, and understand the social factors contributing to this diversity through the analysis of peasant practices linked to chestnut trees. To meet these objectives, prospecting trips were carried out in the Tingitan Peninsula in the northwest of Morocco. The choice finds its justification in the fact that this area is known by the presence of chestnut throughout the kingdom. In this context, we have adopted a multidisciplinary methodological approach, a geographic approach consisting in organizing prospecting trips to scan the study area and to identify population of Castanea sativa mill. For each population, we retired the GPS coordinates and described their states. The data collected was processed by QGIS to create a georeferenced database. From the ethnobotanical point of view, direct and semi-direct surveys made it possible to gather information and more elements allowing to examine the place occupied by the chestnuts, the know-how and the agricultural and the social practices which are attached. The surveys concern 389 farmers of different age groups with a total of 3,488 chestnut trees in 39 villages spread over 3 regions. For the characterization of diversity on the whole of the sampling considered according to the descriptors adopted by UPOV, and it is very important here to specify that we will limit ourselves to the presentation of only preliminary results obtained from the characterization of the harvest fruit by referring to only 5 variables. As a result, in the absence of a pre-established list of this area, Our study is the first to establish the states of presence of chestnuts in northern Morocco. Currently, the presence of chestnut in Morocco is limited to the northwestern region. It is found in 39 villages divided between three regions, Al-Haws, Bni Said, and Bni Huzma. From the age point of view, the chestnut population is very heterogeneous. In the region of Al-Haws and Bni Huzmar, the majority of chestnut trees are over than 100 years old and have been exploited for generations. At the level of Bni Said, we have raised the presence of a very heterogeneous mixture which is the fruit of a perpetuity of material that once existed. Thus, we can wonder about the state of these ecotypes. Chestnut populations have a very variable density, ranging from an isolated tree to dense trees. The trees' number by population are just as variable. So, where can we find the chestnut trees? The chestnuts are located in the fields of crops or orchards. They have a place among the fruit trees. They can also grow in the middle of dense scrub or on natural spaces. Chestnut trees which grow in orchards or fields are considered as fruit trees and begin to occupy an important place in the agrarian calendar, in the contrary of chestnut trees which grow in the natural spaces. Thus, as shown here, farmers have a set of techniques and practices to ensure the proper development and fruiting of chestnut trees. These activities take place throughout the year. As an example of these different activities, casting is usually done in February. Only the branches of the lower part of the tree are removed. For irrigation, it is mainly the young chestnut trees or those recently grafted which benefit from it. Chestnut trees are irrigated during the hottest days of the summer. Another example of practice is the grafting of chestnuts. So it is important to clarify that there are two modes of multiplication. The grafting is presented as the asexual mode. It is a common practice, especially in Bni Said. It is done in crown between March and April before the start of flowering. The rootstocks are chestnut trees with little appreciated fruits, bitter, small, or flowery and less than 10 years old. The grafts come from chestnut trees whose fruits are well appreciated. Sowing, which is the sexual mode, is practiced between December and January in different ways according to the villages. The flat seeds of the medium can be planted directly in the soil or in plastic bags or buckets to be transplanted later. Fruiting and harvesting takes place for 2.5 months, an action in which the various members of the family participate and which is done by climbing trees. At the end, the family got together to remove the bags and prepare the chestnuts for sale. The results relating to the data collection for the measurements made on the fruits of the various villages harvested are summarized in a summary table. They show significant variations within and between different villages. The analysis of variance for the different characters measured on the fruits show a very highly significant difference between the different villages, and which is the result of a morphological diversity between the individuals who make up these ecotypes. This difference is expressed with a very high Fisher's factor for all the characters measured. To get an idea in the structure of the variation of the different parameters measured to study the prospected villages, we used multivariate analysis to have a synthetic approach. Thus, a principal component analysis is performed on a matrix encompassing the 31 chestnut villages, taking into account the 9 variables considered in the study. The analysis shows that most of the information is correlated with the first two factors, axes 1 and 2, which contain 77% of the total variance. Axis 1 is clearly distinguished by containing 52.16% of the variance alone. These correlations with the axes will allow us to understand and explain the structuring of the ecotypes given by this analysis. Indeed, axis 1 being the axis which contains the maximum of information, it will therefore be the structuring axis around which the villages will differentiate. The villages that will be located in the positive parts of the axis 1 are the ecotypes that have high values for the variables correlated with this axis, and vice versa for the negative parts of this axis. The projection of the populations in the factorial plane 1, 2 shows that there is no clear structuring with subsets, but rather a structuring in gradients along the axis 1 with 2 opposite poles and indeterminate forms. Thus, the villages Wad al-Khamis, Azfatu, Zamourit, and Wad Zarjun constitute the pole on the positive side of axis 1 as opposite to the villages Asfa 1, Kuf, and Wedlil, which constitutes the negative pole, while the rest of the villages are in intermediate position along a gradient between the two poles. Despite the limited number of agromorphological characters used in this study concerning only fruits, we observe a significant variability between the ecotypes of the different villages with the absence of the region effects. At this level, we can see that the chestnut tree acquires heritage, economic cultural, and genetic values which are essentially translated by the richness and diversity of farming practices on the one hand, and intra and inter-population diversity in the other one. This diversity, which is essentially linked to the mastery of multiplication techniques and the practices around the chestnut tree. The conservation of a traditional chestnut culture well-rooted in the region is essentially based on the enhancement of this diversity through genetic studies and by reinforcing the perspective of preservation, maintenance, and promotion of ancestral practices and the local diversity. Thank you.